Time to answer the age-old question. I guess it's not an age-old question. How long have horse blankets been a thing? When were horse blankets invented? First used in the 17th and 18th centuries, with the invention of the modern cut-to-fit horse blanket attributed to Troy Woolen Mills in 1857. Whoa, would you look at that? Huh. I don't know why I'm so surprised by that. That feels early. I guess I would have thought that maybe it was like a 20th century thing. But I guess people had developed like racehorse breeds and stuff like that before then. Oh well. And thoroughbreds, as we know, don't grow great winter coats. Does my horse need a blanket? When does my horse need a blanket? Will my horse be okay without a blanket tonight? These are questions that always start popping up at this time of year as the temperatures are dropping, snow is falling, and winter is coming. And these questions get asked by first-time horse owners, beginner equestrians, and experienced horse owners and equestrians. Because as horse owners and horse lovers, we always worry. No matter how much experience or knowledge we gain, we will always worry. And unfortunately, our horses can't just tell us when they're going to need blankets. Although I do have a vague memory of reading somewhere recently that there was a study that was trying to determine just that, like if a horse could tell you. Well, I guess it was if they wanted a blanket, not if they needed one. But I also might just be making that up. I don't know. But regardless of whether or not they can show us any signals, they can't just speak up and say, hey, I need a blanket right now. Even though it would be really, really awesome if they could. So today I'm going to try and help guide you on your blanketing journey and try to help you determine whether or not your horse needs a blanket this winter, and if so, when they need one. But before we get into all of that, make sure to subscribe to this channel for more horse and pet informational videos. Follow me over on Instagram for insights into my daily life. You can also go subscribe to my vlog channel to see more of the behind the scenes of my life, how I live my life with my pets, barn vlogs, all of that stuff. All right, let's dive in. There's no one right answer. There's no perfect answer. There is no one temperature or weather condition that requires every single horse to be wearing a blanket. Sorry, I know that's probably not what you were hoping to hear. And I know that that's not what you were hoping to hear because when I first got my horse and I was trying to figure out blanketing, I was going on the Google. I was doing the Googling to try to figure out whether or not Polly needed a blanket. And I just wanted somebody to tell me at this temperature, horses should be wearing a blanket. But of course, alas, that is not what I found because it's not true. Nobody could give me a straight answer and it was very frustrating. Also, just figuring out how to blanket a draft horse if your draft horse needs it, which a lot of them don't, is just like, it's a whole other level of difficulty. Just as it is with training, housing, nutrition, grooming, tack, there is unfortunately no one-size-fits-all solution. Every horse is an individual with individual needs and preferences and histories and facilities that are available to them. A ton of factors play into whether or not your horse needs a blanket, and we're going to try to cover all of them, or at least as many as I could remember / find through my research. If you can think of another factor, please make sure to leave it in the comments so that we can all see it. But what I will say first is that, believe it or not, most horses actually don't need blankets. Shocking, I know, especially if you live in a place like North America, where for the most part, as soon as the sky turns gray, all the horses at the boarding facilities are wearing rain sheets. And don't get me wrong, some of those horses do actually need those sheets, but most of them don't. So long as a horse is healthy, unclipped, and used to the climate that they're living in, most horses actually don't need blankets at all. A study done on Canadian horses actually revealed that so long as the horse was healthy, unclipped, and used to the climate that they were in, most horses could actually withstand temperatures as low as -15 degrees Celsius before seeing any behavior change that would indicate the need of a blanket. Which, just a heads up, I'm Canadian, which means that I deal in Celsius when talking about outdoor temperatures. My oven, that's a different story. My oven is Fahrenheit, but outdoor temperatures, that's Celsius for me. So in this video, all of the temperatures that I'm using are Celsius, not Fahrenheit. If I say a temperature in Celsius and you don't really have a sense of what that means, you want to know what it is in Fahrenheit, open another tab on your device and Google the conversion. I made a lot of videos on TikTok and YouTube Shorts last year where I was talking about how my horse usually doesn't need a blanket until about -12 or -15 degrees Celsius. And I got a lot of people in my comments who were actually upset and telling me to speak American and tell them what it was in Fahrenheit as if they didn't have the access to the internet in their very hands at that moment. They had their phone in their hand and they were watching this video and they were telling me to tell them what it was, as if they did not have the complete capability to Google it. And they would probably find out faster through Googling it than through waiting for me to respond to their comment. You are a capable person with access to the internet. You can take the 2 seconds to Google it yourself. That's not my job to convert it for you. And I'm not going to speak American, because I'm not American. I'm Canadian. It's not my job to cater to you, and just in case you didn't know, the majority of the world uses Celsius and not Fahrenheit. Sorry, this is going to sound like me attacking Americans, which is not what I'm doing. I'm not saying that all Americans are like this, because I know that they're not. It's just that the comments that I got were all from Americans telling me that I needed to tell them what it was, and it was very frustrating. Little rant done. Okay, sorry about that. Now, obviously, the number one thing is if your horse is showing signs of being cold, put a blanket on them. I made an in-depth video last year going over, I think it's 6 signs that your horse might be cold. I'll link that in the description and I'll put a card up here. And I also made a video going over 2 terms that I think that all horse owners should know, that being lower critical temperature and thermoregulation, and I discuss how those work as well. Again, I will link that as well. Horses have developed very efficient methods of staying warm. Guard hairs protect the soft hair of the undercoat from dirt and water, and the fluffy hairs of their undercoat trap warm air and act like insulation for your horse. The horse's body also generates heat through digestive activity. As hay ferments in the hindgut, it gives off long-lasting heat, warming them from the inside out, which is why providing unlimited forage to your horse is one of the best things you can do to help them stay warm. Because of these 2 factors, most horses generally don't need a blanket until it's about -10 or -15 degrees, so long as that is a normal temperature for the climate that they live in and that they're used to. But that's really if temperatures are the only thing at play. In many places, like up here in Canada where I live, on winter days, we're not just dealing with cold temperatures, we're dealing with wind, we're dealing with snow, and sometimes we're dealing with my enemy, the bane of my existence, freezing rain. I will take buttloads of snow over freezing rain any day. Any day. Wind and rain will almost always affect your horse's ability to stay warm. Now, many horses are okay out in the rain without a blanket because the way that the horse's coat is designed actually causes water to, for the most part, roll off of their hair until they've been, soaked through. But when temperatures drop below freezing and you're dealing with freezing rain, it's probably a good idea to put on a rain sheet or an insulated rain sheet, particularly if your horse does not have access to shelter or if they're likely to be kicked out of the shelter. Like if there's only one small shelter and there's a bunch of horses, if your horse is kind of lower down, is a more submissive horse, and they're likely to be kicked out of the shelter, then you want to make sure you're providing them with a little bit of coverage. Rain flattens your horse's coat, which affects their ability to stay warm. When horses are keeping themselves warm, typically their hair is all poofed up, but the rain will flatten it down, and if it rains enough for long enough, it will eventually soak through your horse's coat and get down to the skin, and once their skin is wet, their skin will get cold. In the winter. In the summer, for the most part, your horse is probably going to be completely fine if they get soaked through. In fact, they actually might appreciate it, particularly if it's been a very hot day. Snow usually isn't much of a problem unless it's that wet, mushy, barely snow. Do you know what I'm talking about? Like when the temperatures are either just above freezing or just below freezing, so it's not really cold enough for snow to stay snow, and it just kind of melts on anything that it lands on. I treat that super wet stuff the same way I treat rain. When it's cold enough for snow to actually stay snow, snow should land on your horse's coat and it should just sit there and actually provide sometimes another insulating layer. You'll hear a lot of people tell you that if snow is landing on a horse's coat and just sitting there, then it tells you that they are thermoregulating properly. And that is true. The only caveat that I will place on that is that when temperatures are not actually cold enough for snow to stay snow, it will melt on whatever it lands on. Those days where it's 1 degree out and it's snowing, but the snow kind of melts within about 30 minutes of it landing on the ground. That kind of snow is going to melt on your horse's back too, regardless of how your horse is thermoregulating. So I like to say if it's between -2, -3 to then anything above freezing, don't take snow melting on your horse as a sign of them not thermoregulating properly, because usually at those temperatures, snow is going to melt on anything. Now, if it's colder than that, colder than about, and again, this is going to depend on where you live, but colder than about -3-ish, and snow is regularly just melting on your horse's back, they're going to need a blanket, and you should probably call the vet because there's probably a health condition underlying that you're not aware of that is affecting your horse's ability to thermoregulate. Horses always have to have access to shelter, especially if they live outside full time and they're not coming in at night. This shelter needs to be at the very least a windbreak, but preferably a 3-walled shelter with a roof. If your horse doesn't have access to shelter of any kind, then they should most likely be wearing a blanket, so long as the temperatures are low enough to necessitate it. You don't want to put on a blanket just because they don't have shelter, but it's actually too warm for your horse to be wearing a blanket, and then they start sweating. Or just so long as it's cold enough that putting a blanket on your horse isn't going to make them uncomfortable, because sometimes you can put a blanket on a horse when they don't necessarily need it and they'll be okay. Because yes, a blanket flattens a horse's coat and compromises their insulating abilities, which would make you think that putting a blanket on is unlikely to make them overheat when it's cold out, because you're taking away their insulating. But some horses have so much hair that flattening it doesn't make that much of a difference. For example, in the middle of the winter, typically my horse looks like a polar bear with hair coming 4 to 5 inches off of her. If I put a 200 gram on her at -5 when she has her full grown coat in, even though she's now having that flattened, or even if I put an insulated rain sheet on her, she's now having that hair flattened. So you'd think, oh, it's taking away her insulating abilities. There is so much hair there still that if I put anything on her at that temperature, she's just going to sweat. Polly actually usually sweats when it's warmer than -5 in the winter when she has her winter coat in. So, part of that does have to do with her weight, but that actually brings me to my next point. Your horse's body condition score will greatly affect whether or not they need a blanket. Overweight and obese horses tend to have a much easier time staying warm because they have all of that additional fat tissue, which acts as an insulator. This is why overweight horses tend to have heat intolerance. Underweight horses will typically run cold much faster because they're lacking that insulating tissue. A horse with an ideal body condition score of 5 or a higher body condition score are way more likely to be perfectly happy without a blanket at temperatures that are below freezing. Horses with lower body condition scores, like anything from a 1 through a 4, are probably going to need light blankets before you're reaching freezing temperatures and are going to need medium to heavyweight blankets when you're dropping below freezing temperatures. But if you have a horse that has an ideal score of 5 or a score that is higher than 5, those horses are way more likely to be perfectly happy without a blanket at temperatures that go as low as like -10 or -15. And some horses never need any blankets at all. Some horses, you can stick them out in that back field with a shelter and a lot of hay, -30, -40, and they're fine. But not all horses are like that. So nutrition is really important. Obviously, we don't want our horses to be overweight, but in the winter, a little bit of extra body condition, a little bit of extra fat is not necessarily a bad thing. So I'm not saying that you should feed your horse to try to get them to be overweight heading into winter, but what I'm saying is that if your horse is at like a 6 heading into winter, don't stress about it too much because that extra fat is going to help them through the winter and you can worry about getting it off when the spring comes. The age of your horse is also an important factor when it comes to the efficiency of their thermoregulation. Foals will typically always need blankets in winter because they're so small and their body is focusing most of its energy on growth and not thermoregulation, which is what we want. We want their bodies to be focused on growth. And senior horses often run cold more than a younger or middle-aged horse would. Your horse's overall health also affects their ability to stay warm. A completely healthy horse with no medical conditions or injuries will have a much easier time staying warm than a horse with an underlying chronic or acute condition. If your horse is completely healthy, then they've got a very good chance of not needing as heavy blanketing or not needing blanketing at all. But if your horse's health is compromised in any way, then they're likely going to need some help staying warm. If your horse is clipped, meaning that you've clipped off some or all of their body hair for exercise purposes, they're going to need a blanket, and quite heavy blanketing. For those who don't know, horses that are ridden heavily throughout the winter commonly have some or all of the hair on their body, not including the legs and face, clipped so that owners can avoid turning out a horse that is still damp from sweat. It may seem weird to trim off something that keeps them warm, but believe me, it is better than the alternative, which is turning out a horse that is still even slightly damp from sweat, because that sweat will freeze and then they will freeze too. Certain breeds of horses are just better designed for colder temperatures than others, particularly draft horses and native pony breeds. They get fluffy. Really fluffy, like really fluffy. It's so cute. Whereas breeds like thoroughbreds or some breeds of warm bloods, their winter coats leave something to be desired. What climate your horse is used to is also going to affect their blanketing needs. If you live in Colorado, for example, where it can get fairly cold in the winter, and you've just purchased and shipped a horse from Florida to your home in Colorado, and that horse was born and raised in Florida, that horse is going to need quite a bit of blanketing because he's not going to adjust just like that. Horses don't have all of the innate ability to withstand like -10, -20 just because they're horses. A lot of them do, but a lot of them are also going to rely on what they're used to growing up. And that horse may adjust to the climate over the next few years and need less blanketing, but it's likely that that horse will still need heavier blanketing than a horse that was born and raised in Colorado. So you can probably see from all of this that blanketing depends on a lot of different factors. But typically, a horse that is well accustomed to the climate that they're currently in, is healthy, in good body condition with a good winter coat, is unclipped, and is not a senior or a baby that has access to shelter, will be okay without a blanket until about -10 to -15 degrees Celsius before wind chill, at least for horses that live somewhere that gets that cold. Another piece of information to keep in mind is that sometimes improper blanketing is worse than no blanketing at all. Throwing on a rain sheet with no fill, while yes, it will block wind, will also flatten your horse's coat and render natural insulation almost useless. If it's cold out, any blanket that's being put on has to have enough fill to not only compensate for the flattening of the hair, but provide additional warmth. We put blankets on when a horse's natural thermoregulation abilities are not going to be enough. Putting on a heavyweight blanket, yes, will flatten the hair, but it will also compensate for the flattening of the hair and provide additional warmth that the horse would not have naturally. Another thing that most horse owners don't want to hear, because it's really, really annoying, trust me, I get it, it's an annoying thing to hear, is that it's gonna be a little bit of trial and error. The information in this video is meant to help guide you, but at the end of the day, you're going to have to experiment a bit, try some things out, and see what's going to work best for your horse. Some horses also like their blankets and others don't, which is very frustrating in moments when your horse actually does need a blanket on. I'm very grateful that Polly will pretty much let you put anything on her whenever. She's not a fan of blankets. She kind of, you know how when you're with a horse or a person who's annoyed with you, regardless of if they're just like, regardless of if their face is portraying it, you can just feel the energy radiating off of them of, I'm pissed at you. Polly does that a little bit when I put a blanket on her. You're going to have to try out different fills of different blankets to try to figure out what's going to be best for your horse. Obviously, don't just throw them on randomly. Don't just be blanketing willy-nilly. Use this information to help guide your decisions. But you're going to have to try things out a bit, and you're going to have to make mistakes, because if you don't make any mistakes, then very little learning is going to happen, right? So keep in mind that it's okay to make mistakes in regards to blanketing your horse, because if you don't make mistakes, how are you going to learn what works best, right? Blanketing needs are also going to change for your horse throughout their life. Like I said, senior horses are going to need more blanketing than a younger horse would. Sometimes their health status changes. Sometimes you change barns, the facility changes, there's less wind blocks, things like that. Your horse's blanketing needs will probably shift a bit year to year, especially with climate change and the way it's screwing over everybody and all of our animals. I'm not sure if you guys have noticed it. I have noticed the way that the temperature differences have affected horses in the past 10 years here where I live. And so it's just, it's another reminder for how much climate change is really, really affecting all of us on the planet. And we need to do we need to do our best to try to minimize our impact on the environment, because not only is it, destroying our home and affecting us and our lives, it's also affecting our animals. It's not just affecting wildlife, it's also affecting our domesticated animals. I know that you probably clicked on this video hoping that I would tell you a specific temperature and a specific weather condition at which every single horse needs a blanket. I'm sorry that I couldn't give that to you. It just doesn't exist. Unfortunately, as it is with most things when it comes to horses, it's just not that simple, because why would it be simple? Can anything ever be simple when it comes to horses? No, probably not. The main things I want you to take away are that, one, most healthy horses don't actually need blankets, or don't need them all that often. Generally, in today's society, I would say that we over-blanket horses more than we under-blanket them. Two, it's going to take a little bit of trial and error to figure out what works best for your horse. And three, it's okay to make mistakes. You will make mistakes. Mistakes will happen. And that's okay. That's how we learn. That's how we grow. Oh, also, if you don't know, ask for help. If you are trying to figure out on a certain day if your horse needs a blanket, find someone in your barn whose judgment that you trust and ask them what they think. Okay, I think that's everything. If you would be interested on me making videos on blankets that go more in depth about the blankets themselves, like talking about the fill, talking about the denier, the different styles, the sizing, the brands, all of those things, I can totally do that. Just let me know. Or if you would like an instructional video on how to, you know what, I think I just will make an instructional video on how to put on blankets, because while most equestrians know, some newer equestrians might not, and they might want to see that. So, yeah, I think I will do that. Again, remember that you can follow both me and Padfoot over on Instagram to see little bits of what we're up to, hear random thoughts about random little things. You can subscribe to my vlog channel if you'd like to see my life with my horse and with, why did I point at Padfoot when I said my horse? With my dog and my horse. Barn vlogs, animal vlogs, day in the life vlogs are all over there from now on. And subscribe to this channel if you liked this video, because I post a lot of videos like this. Thank you guys so much for watching, and until I see you in the next one, remember, just because you're cold doesn't mean they're cold, and think critically.